Okay, we are live. Hey, how you doing? Oh, turn on TV. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry, guys. Right on time. I had some things to tell you before we started, but it's too late now. So.
Oh, okay.
I gotta leave promptly at 7. I hope
Rick?
Rick is coming tonight. I hope he is.
I think I should take personal offense at that.
No, I didn't get a chance to finish all my reading. It's been very busy for the past week or so, and tonight I was busy also. I had to go out to an appointment, so it's just been crazy, and that's why I hope Rick is here tonight.
I hope he is too.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't finish all of mine either, and I didn't write any questions. Even though I do have a little plan. I did identify some quotes that if I had had the energy to write questions, they would have come off of those quotes.
Oh, I thought maybe you just put a lock. I thought maybe you just put a lock on them.
No. I mean, we've been off for 2 weeks, and so I thought I was going to have a really great agenda coming back tonight, but I got distracted by another project over the last couple of weeks, and so here we are. And your wish is Rick's command.
Praise Jesus.
Venita was just praying you would make it here tonight, Rick.
Oh, if I don't make it, I call you as possibly as long as in advance as possible. No.
Rick,
I know.
Rick, it's an inside joke, Rick. We'll tell you about it later. I'm glad you're here. I'm happy you're here. I'm so happy to see you tonight.
No problem. Yeah, I'm kind of exhausted by work. Why is it that during the pandemic everybody becomes insane and makes everything more complicated?
Well, that's why I was talking about to Michelle. I don't understand it. All the extra that's going on. I can't do extra with anyone, no matter who you are. I just can't do the extra. It's enough just trying to get through the pandemic. Just do what you need to do. You know what I'm saying, Rick? And people are just putting all this extra. And it really is no reason for the extra because nobody cares about your extra. Nobody wants to do your extra. We're just trying to get through this. So I'm glad, Rick. I'm glad somebody feels the way I do. I'm glad to see you here tonight.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you too. I needed
that.
Yeah. Yes, it's great to be able to take this time with each other. I was listening to a podcast today. Hillary Clinton has a new podcast called You, Me, and Both, something like that. Where she's interviewing some of her multitude of friends, and so in this particular one, she was focused on mental health. And one of the people that she interviewed was Audra McDonald, the Broadway star. And another was this guy, I don't know his name, but he was a vet who was talking about PTSD. And he's someone who was very likely going to be the next mayor, I think in Kansas City, but he pulled out at the last minute because he knew he had this stuff going on. But Hillary said, she wanted to do this show because she understands that because of COVID, folk are really freaking out, and we need to take some time and focus on our mental health. So it was a good show. I shared it.
I also wonder, honestly, if we're not over medicating people for mental health or inadequately, because I feel a lot of people are going insane also because they have these medications without, usually, they give you antidepressants. If normally you only get antidepressants, the rule should be if you go on therapy. The
Yeah.
antidepressants are there to lower your sensitivity so that what you
Yeah.
hear during therapy doesn't freak you out and makes you even, helps you. But you don't take
Right.
antidepressants alone. It's not a it's not a solution. It's here to cope and allow you not to be overwhelmed with emotions and become suicidal or and I feel a lot of people are benzodiazepines, anti-anxiety medications,
Mhm.
medications to increase their productivity. But now there's no more work like before to the side effects were seen as good things. For example, some side effects for some medications make you very focused. Adderall, great for
Mhm.
engineers. What happens
Mm-hmm.
when you're on Adderall at home and you work remotely?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think, there's this lady who freaked out over masks. Remember a few months ago? And she said she had connection to the White House in front of cops and her husband got arrested. She came back about a month ago and said, well, yeah, I know. I'm Karen. I truly had a real psychotic episode. And when I look at the video now, I feel, whoa, I was far fetched. And she's not trying to, of course, she's trying to make a comeback as well. But I think she was sincere in saying you have to stop thinking that when people go insane, when they talk about politics, race, and go insane, it's not insanity. Yes, you can then say it was in you, it was over the okay, but the way, there are signs of insanity. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
MSNBC, for example, why did they recruit Rosenbar? We knew she was insane. It wasn't a surprise, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is that
Yeah.
I feel America doesn't treat mental health properly because how can you be in good mental health when society itself is at you, at your throat? Competition, lawsuits,
Right.
liability, credit cards. I mean,
Right. Right. No, I
Yeah.
agree absolutely. One of the points that Hillary made with the veteran that she was speaking with was that, as he was just, it took 10 years after he came out of the military for him to decide that maybe he really did have PTSD and should get some help. And so he spent 10 years having these horrible nightmares and not getting a good night's sleep. And so Hillary was saying to him that, she thinks that's one of the problems, that we really don't know what these various mental health problems look like, you know, and it's hard. I mean, I spent some time on the homeless journey. And one of the sort of shocking things to me was how they really are fostering, from my perspective, it appeared they are fostering drug addiction, and with very little effort. Like, if you had listened to my story, I guess one conclusion could be, oh, this is depression, you need some drugs. But another conclusion could have been, this is unemployment, you need some work, you know? And it's like, rather than really try to parse what is going on with a person, it's like they're following a script. It's like you're really like dealing with robots who are not listening to you, not not parsing. They've got a script. They're going to ask you these, 4 questions. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about killing else? They've got these 4 standard questions. And at the end of it, here's this list of drugs we're going to start you on. It's very frightening.
which is strange because again, that questionnaire has been validated. It's a 15 questionnaire, and if you have a number of points on it. Over the past 2 weeks, have you felt like you wanted to hurt yourself, disappear, kill yourself, or things like that? And the idea is to measure the level of pain a person, to indeed prescribe a medication to lower the risk. But the questionnaire always reminds you therapy is in the algorithm. Now, therapy in America has always been a rich people thing. Who's got time for therapy when you have 3 jobs and 4 kids and you're a single mother? Let's be very honest. I'm not saying, and also it's $300 and not all insurers cover it, except if you try to commit suicide, then maybe.
Right.
So until it's too late to undo the damage, I mean, it's frustrating because if health insurances would reimburse therapy, weekly therapy, would offer that even to people who supposedly don't have mental health issues, as a preventative measure, I'm sure they would save money.
It sounds like you think we should have health care for all, Rick.
No, yeah. This is a socialist idea. I'm no Marxist. They stole the election.
Well, it is everyone's problem in society because everyone needs, I think analysts are great if you find the right one. And the problem also is the people that aren't having immediate health mental issue problems, and just the analysts, when you're surrounded by people that do have mental health issue problems, that's a problem. You begin to have problems because you're dealing with so many people around you that have mental health issue problems.
You become depressed.
So
yourself.
even the ones that are relatively healthy, and I say relative because it's just relative, you begin to have issues because of all the people that have mental issues, health issues around you. So it affects everyone in society. Even if, again, you don't have immediate issues. Going to work every day. There are people around you. Socially, there are people that have mental issues. You know what I'm saying? And those vibes are coming on you. And when you got it, so now it's really magnified. You begin to have issues, just trying to deal with people that have issues, that you don't even understand what their issues are. And to be honest with you, for the most part, even if you want to understand, you don't have the time to understand all the issues that are around you. So it runs into your social life, it runs into your work life, because you're dealing with all these people that have issues around you. You know, it really, and so eventually everybody goes crazy. You know what I'm saying? There's a question. There's a question. Issues that has nothing to do with you. You know, you come in, have a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Bam. But that freaks me out.
But this is where I have a real question, an existential one. How come the Second World War was the most ruthless, brutal war of all time? It was insanely violent. Cities that had stood for millennials had disappeared overnight in China, in Europe, in Africa. It was insane. How come people coming out of this horror built a civilization that managed to avoid self-destruction with the Soviet Union? Even the Soviets, Khrushchev wrote a superb letter to Kennedy during the missile crisis saying, we know war never ends until the enemy is wiped out. And it's not, I've been through wars. The logic of war is not just this. And Khrushchev is telling him, please, let's find a solution. And you see all these people who fought during the war, who saw the horror, didn't become insane. They were probably in pain, suffering, but they did not and they felt, what I'm trying to say is that it's like out of this horrible era, and a lot of decolonization heroes fought during the war on the colonial side, but then because they thought they would be given a country, but they felt a sense of responsibility towards civilization itself and other people. Our generation, since the end of the war, we're getting crazy, like mad kings in novels, it's isolated in our palaces with our comfort. And I'm not advocating for war, but the question is there a way maybe for people to realize that what we need in society for good health, mental health, is a collective sense of belonging to a common purpose? And this society has never been it's always been divided, but now it's become to the point that the illusion of unity that was an American thing has disappeared. But for years, no, America has always been divided, it's been segregated, literally. like physically. So
But,
I don't
but
know.
so many things have happened, since the 50s that have, I think fundamentally and irrevocably altered the nature of society. So, after WW2, you've got Vietnam going on. A lot of those soldiers that returned, returned with a drug habit. A lot of drug use that was going on here in the mainland. TV, which just was invented in 1950. Even by the 60s and 70s, it was not ubiquitous in the way that it is today. We are just bombarded. We are bombarded by messages from, as we said at the beginning of this, it's great to be able to take this time with each other, to slow down and have this time with each other, because otherwise your phone is constantly ringing. There's this noise. I'm angry most of the time because my neighbor blasts his music, up to here. All of this angry. I know you said you like the metal, but it's it's that angry rap. Slap your mouth.
It's not even you can listen to angry rap. The question I have for these guys, rap or metal or pop, that put their music so loud that what they're hearing is in their car or in their apartment. Why are they doing this? They're not listening to the music. Actually, they're numbing themselves, and they're numbing. It's like a cocoon,
Yeah, it's all, we're just all bombarded with so much stuff. And, I don't want to say that all 74 million of the nearly 74 million people that voted for Donald are lunatics.
Fake news. 77 million, he says. Fake news. He won by more. Fake news.
But I would bet a good portion of them are. And a part of what I believe their problem is, we're no longer dealing with a common set of facts that we had in the 50s. And that's a huge deal.
Did we ever have this common set of facts? Because think about it. How many Americans knew about Tulsa?
True. But there was that split between what Black people knew and what white people knew. And now there's like a split between what 330 million individual Americans believe to be true. Each one with their own version of reality.
But I think it goes with the death of a myth. And that's why I think a lot of people hate progressives among white people. It's because the myth was, we freed the slaves. We created civil rights. Martin Luther King was a nice mascot. Literally, it's the mindset where they taught this history afterwards. That's why Malcolm X was never in the picture, because he doesn't want to be a mascot at all. Like, we can't. Martin Luther King couldn't be a mascot, but they tried to make him, and after he died, it was easier than ever. I think the myth was white people deep down are good, and our civilization was good. It was an accident. Slavery, genocide, accidents. But now, through science and the internet, we're discovering that now it was engineered. We know we benefit from it, because right now I'm using this. I know the platinum in this was excavated by children in Congo. There's no choice, because they need little hands. But I don't eat meat, stuff like that. And I think the myth has fallen so much that it's a conspiracy. Multiculturalism, the history of slavery, all of that is fake news, not false. I don't know if you noticed this, the semantics here. They never say false like erroneous. They say fake, like counterfeit, not authentic. And I heard a guy who actually said something, a Trump voter who finally said it. He said, no, I think people voted for Biden, but they're not real Americans. They're fake. Americans, because who would vote for Biden if they love America?
Okay.
It's not false. It's not fraud in the sense that ballots have become that were non-existent. It's because we should not be voting because
Right.
we're against our own country. You know that.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
the logic is I don't think it's insane. I think it's literally white people trying to save not the privilege of power, something much more important, because when you don't have power, you need it. The illusion of greatness, of purity.
Yeah, well, that's something Isabel Wilkerson is talking about in our reading for this week in the other group. She has a chapter on narcissism and and how it can affect a whole mass. It's a mass psychology kind of application of narcissism. And one of the lines in there is narcissism leads to fascism. But if you think of the individual narcissist as just this person that believes, they are better than and above than, and they're the only ones with needs that matter. And then, multiply that millions of times. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. Let's do our introduction. Say it, Rick. What?
No, I was just wondering. Yeah, no, but it's. I think you're right. There's a quote from Nietzsche I like, which is, if we want a nation of slaves, we must be insane to give them an education of masters. And he was referring to the fact that Europeans had started mass education and given children who didn't have in the past, education in Europe, access to the great classics. He said, but are you sure it's ignorance that creates evil? Or is it maybe that they could be, and I rethink about that a lot because Americans who voted for Trump, you have some educated people.
Yeah.
So is education can it only work on some
barrier
people?
to fascism?
And also, is it really about ignorance? For a long time, I felt like everybody else, racism was born out of ignorance. I think no. I think it's born out. It's wrong, and it's erroneous, and it's scientifically unsound, but you don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly ignorance is an important factor. But there's a lot of deep psychological stuff going on, part of which is related to the narcissism and just related to the need to feel better than, somebody. And that's very seductive for a lot of people.
But it's like human rights is a strange thing, because in France, they always tell you we're all equal, but that gives them an excuse to bring down people who are actually making a difference. Who are you to think you're better than me? Well, I know science. So what? We're equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it creates something very decadent where people who have no knowledge of anything go on television and talk about that. Like for COVID in France, the experts on television are people who usually started their career as sports commentator for soccer. And this is where we're at. And it's France. And this whole mentality that we're all special. That's very white, very European.
Who is it? Marie Le Pen is your Donald Trump?
No, because she's actually, the problem is that she lost last election because she tried to do the Trump thing. She had never done that. So even her own electorate was like, that's not you. She's actually very dangerously smart. She managed to release French racism in a way that was clever. Instead of saying Arabs, she talked about Islam. And in France, we have a tradition of criticizing ideologies very brutally. Like we use insults like communist this, fascist this, Christian, atheist, well, but everybody's an idiot. And we say that about Islam or Judaism as well. Now, the thing is, when you do that, you're seen as a free thinker in France, not a racist. So she used a Trojan horse. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it works brilliantly. And now she's becoming popular, and she's becoming the last defendant of the Republic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
All right. I'm Logan Michelle Odom, located in Brooklyn, New York. And this is my book, The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance by Laurie Garrett. And tonight we are supposed to be focused on the third quarter of chapter 11, but I know nobody read their book. And Laurie, I just have to say about Laurie Garrett, I mean, I love her as an analyst, but I'm not, I don't even want to say it's not that I don't like her writing. I think she really did not have the best editor. And I think that she was probably smarter than the person who edited her, and the editor didn't have the strength or the intelligence to kind of say to her, we don't really need 100 pages on HIV. The editor didn't really help her organize and condense these materials. And so, I find it, I'm finding it a bit tiresome. Nevertheless, we are in the third quarter of chapter 11, which is called Hatari, Vinidogodogo, Danger, a Very Little Thing, The Origin of AIDS. The challenges of identifying and managing HIV/AIDS in Central and East Africa are explored in this chapter. The chapter also considers ways racism and misperceptions clouded perspectives and led to bad science among Westerners, aka safari scientists, operating in Africa, and how complications of poverty, war, drought, population growth, and famine converged in Africa to put microbes in the winner's seat. Juliana disease is initially seen as a Ugandan curse. The CDC confirms Juliana's disease is AIDS, but Tanzanian physicians were reluctant to accept the diagnosis because the victims did not include homosexuals, drug users, or hemophiliacs. Local travel, myths, and blame emerged as themes in the Ugandan, Tanzania, Kenya experience of AIDS, as well as the reuse of needles in medical facilities. As African doctors were concerned about shortages of syringes and the blood supply, elders focused on behavior of the young people. For so long, the young people have been running around not listening to their elders. Even before the war with Uganda, some of them were running around crazy. They don't listen to the old ways. After the war, it was worse. Discos, prostitutes, babies, so many babies. Now, some of the elders say to them, look here, we told you. Now you are sick. You are paying for all your running around, said Mr. Rutayuji, a hospital administrator in Kajiro. The impact of such critical assessment was lethal. The word AIDS struck horror that many would kill. The word AIDS struck such horror that many would kill themselves, usually by ingesting the pesticide theodon, if they heard such a diagnosis. Dozens of Kajira citizens were rumored to have taken the faster theodon route to their death, and local stores were unable to keep up with the sudden increase in demand for the poison, Garrett reports. American scientists were delayed in understanding the transmissibility of AIDS in Africa in making the link between the disease and heterosexuals because of their own prejudices. Thus, Europe was first in diagnosing HIV among Africans. Moreover, it took a year for the Reagan administration to accept AIDS as a heterosexual issue, thus further delaying an effective response. The importance of language, custom, and politics are also considered in this section of the chapter. Americans routinely offended Africans with their prejudices and assumptions, and no apologies were forthcoming. At the April 1985 International Conference on AIDS in Atlanta, for example, Essex told the gathering that it was reasonable to assume that AIDS started as an African monkey disease and only recently, through an unknown means, entered the human population, wrote Garrett. Then an American journalist at the conference approached the African doctors to say, "We have all heard what Max Essex said here about AIDS originating as an African monkey disease. Tell me, doctor, is it true that Africans have sex with monkeys?" Prejudice and racism thus emerge as impediments to research and intervention in the face of deadly disease, leading ultimately to bad science and a winning scenario for the microbe in Africa. Let's do your introductions. Venita? I can't hear you, you're muted.
Good evening, my name is Venita and I'm joining you from Cromwell, Connecticut. This is my book. Welcome.
And Rick?
Hi, this is Rick. I'm in Queens, New York. Have a great evening. Sorry, I'm exhausted.
It's okay. Yeah, so we have been talking about HIV/AIDS a lot, and notwithstanding what I said about Garrett's excessive wordiness and lack of good editing, this section does take us to another dimension of the AIDS issue, and to me, I think one of the most critical pieces of it is that AIDS showed up differently in Africa than it did, in other parts of the world. It showed up among heterosexuals, whereas the homophobia and the prejudice against drug users and had impeded and delayed the response in America. But once you acknowledge that it's not just homosexuals, it's not just drug users, it's also heterosexuals. And if you have any humanity in you at all, then you want to start to put some energy and resources into figuring out this issue. And so prejudice and racism distorted this process all along the way.
There's a horrible quote from the Reichsmaster of the official Nazi in charge of medicine in the German army. And then the Wannsee conference that decided the final solution, the Holocaust, there was a debate about not having to move them around because logistics, and let them starve to death in the ghetto. And the doctor, who was a real anti-Semite, he wasn't about being nice to them. He just stood up and said, well, when your troops will vomit because of dysentery and have typhus fever, then you'll know that the viruses don't care if you're true Aryan or Jew. And he had no sympathies. But even Nazis knew that viruses don't care. And it's interesting to see that to a certain extent, people always think like in the Middle Age that diseases are a sort of punishment. So if you're not punishable because you're not homosexual or a drug addict, you cannot have AIDS. Exactly like you're not a Democrat come back from the East Coast, so you can't be dying of COVID. Must be lung cancer. So you know, it's odd, this mental gymnastics that go
Yes,
on with the moral issue of diseases. You know,
yes. And including among medical and scientific people. I mean, that was one of the interesting things in this part of the chapter. That even them, you know, let their prejudices cloud. Like I remember there's one of the scientists who stands up at one of the conferences when he's trying to convince them that yes, heterosexuals can get HIV too. And he's like, I can't believe you're scientists. I don't understand how you think that a virus can go from a penis to an asshole, but can't go to a vagina. You know, it's like,
yeah, because the virus, Michelle, recognizes. I mean, come on. The virus has a radar. I don't know. It's insane, you know. And the worst part is the reason why we know now HIV positive patients first appear as homosexual was the anomaly that they had an incredible health status, and just before this collapse. And also, we know now that the reason is, and it's true about heterosexual couples, anal sex increases by 5-fold the risk of transmission of HIV. And the reason is obvious. There are more micro lesions with anal sex. There are more trauma openings. You know, there's more possibility of blood. Blood is the main transmissible, and that's why that, you know, that's the reason why it was more prevalent at first. But you're right. The risk is just lower because there are fewer lesions. But again, you know, it doesn't make a difference if nobody among heterosexuals think they're okay with it. You know, that they can't get it because they'll get it. They'll insist on getting it at one point.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. It's homosexuals were the first to wear condoms.
Yeah. Anita, did anything strike you about this chapter, this section?
It was long. I just don't understand. It was long. That didn't sound very scholarly, but
it sounded like the Queen of England. We thought it was long.
You know,
I like
You're not
that.
amused.
Yes, I thought it was long, very long.
Mm-hmm.
However, I just never understood. It's just so sad how discrimination and biasness get in the way of everything. You know, even even it gets in the way of the truth of the diseases that can be fatal. And every time, the more I read this, and it comes up over and over and over again. People are dying senselessly, many thousands of people, just because of prejudiceness and biasness. Not because necessarily we don't have the capability, the knowledge to solve problems, with diseases, and to find new cures and or ways to maintain them. Most of to me, the destruction, it all comes from, it's an illusion. It's just crazy. Yeah. Why would you believe that if homosexuals, of course, they're downtrodden anyway, so let's just blame it on them. You know, and I heard even back then, well, it's coming from Africans because they go to bed with monkeys. I remember hearing that. Do you remember hearing that?
Chinese people eat bats.
No, really, I remember hearing that. I remember hearing that, and I was just we were very young So I don't think I really could process it like I'm processing it now. Because we were very young, you know, we were like, very young teenagers. And I'm like, it just put me in the mind of my mother telling me the story when she went to school. It's sad. It hurts me all the time. It's bad enough being discriminated against, being Black and being poor. But in school, they would show them in history classes, not the great civilizations and beautiful cities in Africa, not the queens and kings of Africa. You understand what I'm saying? Not the educated Africans, not the beautiful, majestic homes in Africa. They would actually show them pictures of example, which is a tribe, and I respect them because that's what they do. That's their culture. Movies about pygmies.
That's National Geographic bullshit. I'm not saying pygmies are bullshit.
Well, no, what I'm trying to,
but they don't even live in the rainforest
no,
anymore. You know what I mean?
what I'm trying to say is it was deliberate. The reason why I said that is because they wanted to show them, to make it seem like, you know, Black folk just ran around, you know,
naked,
like
dancing in the fire.
And when I read this, I'm like, it never ends. You know, the same way with AIDS. It had to come. Anything that's bad, number one, always come from Black folk in Africa. I mean, that's the first thing, even before they investigate. The next thing you hear is it comes from Africa, and I just
right.
It makes me so sad that prejudiceness and biases are still so alive today that we're dying from it. They could blame COVID.
Oh, they
Africa,
will.
And only Black folks get it.
Well, there is already a theory about that, which is the pangolin in Africa is being trafficked by Chinese people, and COVID started in Africa actually. And you have this there's no evidence to it whatsoever. But you hear people doing that, and to your point, you know, even if people are sometimes dancing in the fire at night, the way that's shown to the world outside of Black people is exactly if Black people were the majority and there were shown images of white people going in clubs, puking all over the floor, yelling at each other during soccer games, and they would have told you those are white people. That's how, you know, they take a bit, like you said, they forgot about, like, I had to explain to people that there were actual empires and kingdoms throughout African history, not just one. Some collapsed, not because of white people, because they didn't believe me. I had to show them pictures of you know, Zimbabwe and what was called Rhodesia, and like, you remember the theory about Rhodesia, those buildings. Oh no, that's probably Arabs. It can't be Black people. You're like, you're super south of the Mediterranean, guys. Like,
but you have to think about the time, Rick. This was intentional. To make my mother and all the Black folks in that era feel less than. They feel like barbaric animals, so that you wouldn't think in school, you wouldn't try in school. You know,
thank us for converting you. Thank us for teaching you civilization, right?
And this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. And that actually happened to my mom more than once. That was part of the education, period. Is to make sure that you show the Black children, you know, in high school, middle school, everywhere, that, you know, start conditioning them that you are just a barbaric, four-legged, you know, and this is the, you know, and then they started after that. It was a shame. It depends on where you lived, whether it's in the city, and what state you lived in. They had the academic route or the commercial route. They sent the Black children down the commercial route and the white children down the academic route. And that was standard. That was a standard practice. No matter how bright you were, that was a standard practice.
No, but it's great. Like that, they learn to work. That's don't worry. I heard that in Europe about African immigrants.
But the thing is, like I was talking about the narcissism that Isabel Wilkerson is talking about in Caste, her book, is in this particular chapter on narcissism. She's looking at how, you know, white people get fed this false sense of superiority, and that's what leads to their collective narcissism. While Black people get fed this false sense of inferiority, thus creating various issues, among people of color and her language, lower caste. But for me, what we're talking about here and this chapter, it's just another example of how this myth making, it just, as Venita said in the beginning, it just stops progress for everybody. And it's just, as a human being, as a member of the species, it's just a real head scratcher as to why we wouldn't want the best solutions for ourselves, why we would rather cling to these myths than it is what it is. I was looking, let me see if this is it, on page 347 for a minute. I think I want to show you something there. Yeah, 347, about in the, let me see, 1, 2, 3, like 4 chapters from the bottom, near the bottom. There's a sentence. They knew that syphilis, gonorrhea, chancroid, chlamydia, and candida were rampant in most non-Arab African countries, even though none of those microbes was known to exist on the continent prior to Euro-Arab colonialism and the slave trade eras. The two scientists feared that AIDS might follow that pattern of blah, blah, blah.
It's the Silk Road. Africa, there's a thing that every anthropologist in Europe has noticed from African nations. They don't live in the rainforest. They live outside. They use the rainforest, but they don't live, except for pygmies. That's why they were studied so extensively. They're an exception. and like Maasai living in the middle of the desert, another exception for African nations, except for in the north of Africa, but it's Mediterranean. And what they notice is, remember the Ebola chapter? People who are so-called uneducated had the memory of quarantining, creating, you remember burying the dead away from the village, self-isolating. Incredible, right? Well, this is not improvised knowledge. And the reason for that is I think Africa has not been we don't have that many chronicles of African nations being destroyed by epidemics. And there's a chronicle, you have to look at the Mecca chronicles. In Mecca, a lot of kings from, Senegal, well, what wasn't Senegal at that point, but the Mali kingdom and whatnot were very rich and came with like caravans of 130 camels full of gold and spice. So Africa was extremely rich. And you're right. We notice a dip in the population from, basically villages disappear. We have traces of villages that have been abandoned, not destroyed, abandoned. So no war. And the theory is that through the Silk Road and the Arabs commercing with Zimbabwe, the future Zimbabwe, and the Europeans going around starting colonizing, we brought in these diseases. Before America, smallpox was non-existent in Africa. When it strikes in America, it appears at the same time in Africa. What's common to both continents at the same time? Colonization. And so, it's interesting to see that now, because it's more because people are racist, they project onto Black people the source of the disease, instead of realizing that the racism created the disease by, making it something that is not my problem. And to the point that, it's I remember in Europe, people were saying Africans have sex all the time and have so many children. And the whole horror of it was that even Macron, before he got elected, said, well, in Africa, they got to be accountable. They got to stop having 7 children. And Senegal reacted saying, are you insane? Saying, do you know how many? So first of all, most African women don't have 7 children. They have 2 or 3 max. And a lot die. And a lot of women still die when they give birth. The population of Africa is 750, 800 million. It's the smallest continental population of Oceania. But, this prejudice of barbaric people having sex all the time with anything. It's never about food in Africa. It's always about sex. And there's this racist trope about men with what? That creates anger in white men and so-called desire in white women. All those, it's always about sexuality with white people looking at black people. Even in rap and music, you don't see, okay, Rihanna shows her butt, not Taylor Swift. You know what I mean? It wouldn't work for Taylor Swift to do it because she's white. She doesn't do that. I still feel it's around this.
Oh, it's definitely here. Oh, it's definitely
in
here.
Europe, everywhere, I think, where there are white people, there's still this objectification of black people into tools, instruments of pleasure or displeasure.
Yes.
Right.
Well, they still expect that, even in your workplace. They expect the educated, happy, smiling Negro to come in. No. Really.
Hey, we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, and they have to smile through everything while the white while the white man will sit there and he don't have to smile. He can turn around and tell his boss, fuck you today. No worries.
I like this.
But the black man has to sit there and be under pressure and under stress because they expect him to smile his way through everything. God forbid he shows his displeasure. Even worse, his intellect.
Well, you think about it in terms of kids. White kid putting kids get into a bus, yell, white kids, hey, it's Saturday, go on the seat, are loud, laugh loudly, have their shoes on the seat. You are like, kids. Black kids do that. Call the cops. Take off. And they get arrested. How many black kids got arrested for their shoes on the seat?
Well, that's why with black mothers, and Michelle can remember this, you stay at their hip. If you're not at that hip and they turn around, and that was in fear. That was in fear. First in fear many years ago that they would take your child away from you and sell them. And it just went on with us through life. When we're in public, because of the racism and the nastiness that white folks would inflict on us, you stayed near your little white kids, you run around climbing up walls in stores, but your mother kept you right next to her hip. You remember that, Michelle? Remember that. Don't let them look up and you're not sitting right at that hip. And at first, when you're young, you don't understand. You don't understand. You thought, I don't even know what you thought when you're looking at the little white kids running around. I don't even remember what I thought. I do remember my mother said, excuse me, back here.
Like, why am I not allowed to play like the other kids?
We can't laugh like them. We can't play like them. They talk about people having children. Anybody ever talk about the American farmer? They had 15, 20 kids.
and
no, I'm not trying to be funny. They had literally 15, 20 kids to work that damn farm.
And quantity ain't quality.
But anybody say they're oversexed? Anybody say they're oversexed and having a fleet of kids? And matter of fact, I would have thought they've been too damn tired getting up 3 o'clock in the morning, going out there messing with pigs and chickens, and just turning around. And then, but they weren't tired. No one talked about that. They had 15, 20 kids.
No, but they were married. That's
they were breeding workers.
No, I'm not telling you. They were like, those women, go out there and get them eggs and the chicken, come back, pop a baby, go back out there, milk a cow. Nobody say anything about their 20 kids. And half the time the farmers were starving, so they couldn't feed them.
There's a horrible story about having a lot of children in Europe that they see middle age. We know certain regions, there was a tradition to have as many kids as possible because they knew half die before 6 months.
It's true.
But it's good to have some stuff on the side when you starve. And they noticed that in several countries, in very poor populations, they actually eat dead children. In Russia, in Siberia, they noticed that in the 90s.
Okay,
And so it's
in the
horrible.
1990s?
In the 90s, yeah, they went to Siberia because it was the end of the Soviet Union, and they were actually investigating those bases where they had made Ebola airborne. I'll send you the documentary one day. It's horrible. The scientists discovered that died in 2 days. But so the agency, it was a Swiss agency, was in charge of investigating the area. And when they arrived in the village, people were selling on the marketplace meat, and the biologist who was there noticed the meat was not, and realized what it was: human.
Okay, Rick.
And that's just to tell you that when people say, do you have sex with monkeys, I always remind them, well, maybe you should look into how dark and horrible our own barbaric people can be.
Okay.
It's just that people don't realize also diseases in Europe. In China, they would come and go during the Middle Age, but in Europe, and they would come and go with war. In Europe, they would be endemic because we were so goddamn dirty. There was not a single civilization that was that dirty in history. I still don't understand we were that dirty. It's like insane. Not a single civilization had ever done that. Like, we really believed that dirt or stuff like that could cure you, or bleeding people to death could cure them. We weren't changing our pants, weren't washing. That's why these diseases thrived in Europe. And mutated and became radical. So of course, when they arrived in America and Africa.
Okay. Yeah. I learn something new every night.
On a less gruesome note, another sort of outcome of this prejudice impacted the statistics. So, they had a really hard time getting an accurate count and an accurate assessment of how large the outbreak of AIDS was in Africa. Again, complicated by all the prejudice going on, because you got African doctors that don't want to participate in the conferences, don't want to participate in the data collection, because of all of that. But it just reminded me of what we're dealing with now with coronavirus. And Laurie Garrett was on Rachel Maddow this week. That's her regular hangout spot. And she was talking about how effed up the numbers are. You all remember a few months back, when the outgoing administration took the data collection out of the CDC, and she's saying now it is just one big clusterfuck, which, we knew that was going to happen because that was the point.
Yes.
But it's a similar kind of thing to what was happening in Africa with the data collection at this point. And it's just like, that's just a tool in the toolkit. When you want to keep stuff confused and unresolved, when you want to create myths, and it's just a tool in the toolkit. So Garrett was making the point, she doesn't even know if the Biden administration is going to be able to kind of recover the CDC's role and, eventually get us to an accurate count of what's going on here. Because we don't know if the CDC data collection system was totally dismantled.
And it was already very archaic.
Anyways,
Deborah Burks is the architect of that destruction, by the way. She was so originally she was dissatisfied with the accuracy, and she was right, but she's a naive woman. Whatever people say that she's clever, she really thought that Trump would take the bait to improve it. No, Trump took the bait to simply dismantle it. So there's nothing in replacement. And the other thing is that, thank God, we have two other institutions in America, the Johns Hopkins University and the Department of Health of Minnesota, one of the most prestigious in the world. That are still gathering data. And there's a thing that saves us, AIDS. It's difficult to detect death because it takes time. It can take 3 years between the infection, you know what I mean, and death. COVID, it's more rapid, and COVID has a metric that Trump nor anybody can destroy, because that metric has real consequences for the U.S. military, for our national security, hospital beds. That cannot be tweaked, because when the hospital is overwhelmed, it is overwhelmed. And you know it because people start dying of diseases they should not be dying of, like a heart attack.
Yes.
Or a car accident they should have survived.
One thing Garrett said was that in the beginning, when that happened, when they took the collection out of CDC, there was a lot of confusion, and hospitals didn't know, where they were supposed to be sending their numbers, what was going on. And so then the Trump administration threatened them and told them, if you don't send us your numbers, we're going to take away your Medicare and your Medicaid patients. So they just started throwing shit at the wall. And so that's a piece of it, of why we don't know the legitimacy of the numbers that we do have.
Yeah.
Well, there's another metric we use, excess deaths. So, except if 60,000 people committed suicide on top of those who are always, we are at 350,000 excess deaths in America compared to last year.
Wow.
So, of course, we can probably attribute 20%.
350,000, did you say?
Yeah. So, because that's the thing, like my neighbor, she passed away from COVID, but at home. And there was no interaction with a health professional. She just passed away. And, very elderly people don't have cough. They have fatigue and they die. That's the problem with COVID. And that's why in elderly mansions, most people didn't notice they were dying, because you don't see it. It's very confusing for doctors that the older you become, the least you have the symptoms we expect. But whatever. And the thing is, I lost my train of thought. Where was I?
That we have 350,000 excess deaths.
So let's say we count into that. So every year there are about, depending on the disease, let's say 30,000 people died of cancer. They would have died from maybe 2021 had they had proper treatment during the COVID. Okay, let's say 30,000, 50,000. Let's be even 100,000. It would still be insane, because people would have, Republicans and everybody else would have jumped on the opportunity if really we had 100,000 people committing suicide in America in just 6 months. So it's not suicide. You know what I mean? It's not OD. It's something else. What is it? And my neighbor died of that. 2 months later, at midnight, there was like a lot of wrecking going on, people not breaking down the door. It was midnight on a Saturday. So I took, started taking a broom or something, like stupid, like let's try to see what's happening. And 20 cops breaking in and talking in Spanish, ¿Dónde estás? ¿Dónde? And trying to, and I approach and say, officer, I'm not armed, because they were really nervous. She passed away. What? From COVID 2 months ago. Joe, she passed away. Really? Oh man. Do you have the number of the super? We need to talk to him. They thought she was in danger because they received a welfare
check.
welfare check request from the social services that were paying her pension. So nobody knew. So there are a lot of people out there dying of COVID that are not in the system.
That's true.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because if you don't die at a hospital, how do they know you died of COVID?
That's true.
Right.
And that's what they suspect. I've read it. I've read stories about, some of the editorials about them suspecting that there's far more people that die from COVID than we have recorded, period, without the CDC escapade.
The official number now is about 270.
It's insane.
And they said they suspect there's way more than that. Yeah. Is that something else? So I don't know.
And on top of that, there's another thing that we're going to unearth horribly soon. 1/3 of people with COVID have long-lasting symptoms.
That's another thing. Yes, the suffering of repercussions of COVID.
What's going to be the cost in terms of lives and loss in quality of life? And I'm going to be cynical, productivity.
Oh, yes.
In the coming decades. And, remember all the kids who had polio? All of their lives, they had polio, and our grandmas, they were like, I had polio. It was even like a badge of honor for some of them. But polio did not destroy your cognitive abilities.
Right.
COVID, people who were intellectual say they can't focus. That they notice they can't read like they read before.
Right.
And there's also like people who lost their smell and taste. They work in restaurants. They're chefs. All of these things have an impact. And my mother's lost her smell a long time ago. And we realized she lost her smell and taste in the 80s when we were in South Korea. And she and I used to be very sick every year when it was flu season. We suspect we might have had a coronavirus. Not the same, of course.
Right.
Maybe primed to it. So it's a good thing. But because of that, my mom never realizes when she's drinking milk that has turned sour.
Yes.
So that's a problem. People who can't taste are in danger as well. So, it's.
And will that become a disability? Now, what they're trying to do, the Trump administration is making it more difficult, which I read about a week or so ago, for people to get disability. Oh, yeah. That's coming up on December the 2nd or 3rd. Oh, today or tomorrow.
No worries.
Okay, right, to make it more difficult for people to get disability. Once it has been turned down, they're going to make it super hard for you, because they turn you down the first and second time anyway, from my reading. But they're going to make it super hard for you now.
Yeah, they don't want to spend the money.
Right, they're going to make it super hard for you now to get disability. Okay, so they're always one step ahead of you, because there's going to be a lot of people post-COVID that's going to have all kinds of disabilities, whether it's lung, whether it's cognitive, whether it's whatever, that may have to go on disability.
And how many people have PTSD from the hospital stay at the ICU?
Well, how many people has PTSD from just dealing with COVID every day? They don't even get it.
What's going to be
some help right now?
I'm sending letters to some professors that I know and some universities, telling them we need a plan in 2 years for the STD surge. Because as soon as we have a vaccine and everybody, the herd immunity is reached, I can tell you we're going to have problems. Because people are going to go out crazy, and we have an equivalent after the 1918 Spanish flu. We have the crazy years, the Cabaret years, and guess what happens in the 1920s? Jazz. The craziest music of all time comes out of the despair of the Spanish flu. It became mainstream at that point. It existed in New Orleans.
People are gonna go crazy, but have we ever settled down? I mean, so one of the other things going on in this chapter, as they're trying to get a handle on the prevalence of AIDS in Africa, is that at one point they feel like it's no longer epidemic, it's endemic. It's just everywhere. And so it just made me wonder, is that the situation we're setting ourselves up for here with coronavirus, where, you just everybody.
But the WHO announced it in August. The
Huh?
WHO officially announced that we're no longer in the pandemic phase. We're in the endemic phase. It's done. It's human to
It's
human.
done.
We cannot. It's smallpox now. The only way we can stop it is by vaccinating in every single human being on Earth. It's part of our society now. We could have stopped it, but
Yeah, I
no.
read that. I read that. If you didn't nip it in the bud out the gate, I read a huge article about that.
Yeah,
Then it's too late now. It's a
it
part
is.
of your being. Period.
Contact tracing is useless. At
That's
that
what they
point, we're
said.
done. It doesn't work anymore, and
Too much now.
it's horrible. We're in
Too much.
2020, not 1918.
And now
No.
Scott Atlas resigns, because his work here is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
And
So
the vaccines look good, really good. Pfizer and Moderna's look really good. I'm surprised by Moderna. I had doubts. My big problem is at the moment we have a vaccine which technology is safe and could be really, this time I think we have something revolutionary. The fridges alone are not going to be, they say that the priority people are going to be the people in elderly homes and stuff.
yes.
But I think what they mean by that is that the general population, I'm probably in New York will probably get it sooner than people in the suburbs of Raleigh, or because the fridges are too expensive. Like Mount Sinai has bought 7 of them. It's $15 million.
Yeah, they're very expensive. Super.
How
So
much?
15 million, and I know dollars for 7 or 8, and I know a hospital in Louisville, a big health system leased them for $1,500,000 for the next 10 months. Their company's making a ton of money right now, and you look, nobody noticed that the day they announced the vaccine, what is the other market share that went super high? Samsung. They build fridges. They build the fridges. So
That's true.
Samsung is making money. So it's terrible because this vaccine, I'm sure, will not. They'll say everybody can get it, but then when you'll go to your doctor, they say you need to go to that place, and that place will have a line of 2 miles, 3 miles. But people who are rich in rich neighborhoods will have the fridge in the hospital they usually go to, so they'll go by appointment.
Again, it's going to be the poor people.
You say it looks good. So does that mean you're going to be trying to get it early on, Rick?
No, I'll get it when
you don't fit any of those.
I'll get it
categories.
only once everybody's been vaccinated who is, in my opinion, more worthy of being vaccinated. I mean, essential workers, nurses, doctors, elderly homes, people at risk. And I'll get vaccinated when and only when there are enough stocks for these people first. I refuse. I think that rich people who would get the vaccine as soon as it's out because they can pay for it should be considered should not be able to purchase this. The purchase should be limited. Purchase of the vaccine should be prohibited. Only the government can purchase it, because otherwise we're going to have the same fiasco as the NBA players getting COVID tests in February.
Yeah. Yes.
No, it's a no. This time we got to stop these things and be serious.
Yeah.
But the vaccine is, the technology. The reason why we had safety issues with vaccines in the past and you needed years to study them is because the virus, there are 2 technologies: attenuated virus, polio, or just the membrane of the virus, not the core. So what happens is that the membrane is important because this is how it gets into your cells. So your immune system fights that membrane. The problem is that it's not lethal. That's why we have adjuvants like aluminum at very micro doses to create a toxin that forces the immune system to see the membrane and learn how to beat that virus while it tries to beat the aluminum, and it beats it. But then there's the attenuated virus. In both cases, there's a risk it penetrates the myelin of your spinal cord, gets into the fluid, and you have neurological problems and narcolepsy. Major problem. So that's why they're studied 10 years. This technology, it's a computer hack. They take the message, the RNA message from the virus that allows it to duplicate itself in our cells. The pure message without anything else, no organic entity, just the RNA, the messenger that dies. It's not even alive, it's just a code into our bloodstream, so that our genetic system and our immune system recodes itself, learns from it like in a video game instead of a real virus or a membrane. So safety there is no longer an issue. It's literally telling the body, hey, sending you a video game. What do you think about it? Play it. It's brilliant. Now, the problem is that we don't know how efficacious it is long term. Maybe the body forgets the coding, but it looks really promising. And I'm advocating actually that all vaccines should be made like that in the future. The flu, HPV, because the risk of side effects seems almost non-existent. And again, it's impossible to know. But right now, when I look at their clinical trials, the adverse events were skin reactions or COVID-19 symptoms for a few days. Like when you get a vaccine. But nothing. AstraZeneca is an important vaccine for the world. But the problem is they did have 2 major adverse events during their trial that are, I'm a little worried about this one. It's the old school technology. That's why it should take another at least year for safety.
So we should wait until, of course, that is a fantastic plan for the most vulnerable to get taken care of first. Then Michelle and I have to wait.
No, you get it. You get it January. You can get it. You have lupus. You are part of the population. Should get it first if you can.
Oh, don't worry about it, though, Rick. I'm not trying to do all that. See, what I was going to say is that Michelle and I can speak for her in this case, we're going to wait until after you take it.
Yeah.
After all the other people take it. And then since we have our book circle, we can even observe you right up close to see if your head drops off, your tongue falls out your mouth, and you come in here with one finger on your hand. So
he's bleeding from the eyes, right?
Right. So that's what I'm telling you. So I agree with everything you just said wholeheartedly. And then when they get done and everyone gets to the needs, and I'm so glad you feel that way, then you're going to get it, and we're going to observe you for the next year or two.
This is where SNL, old school SNL, or Dave Chappelle could have done an incredible sketch about that. So white people are doing fine with the vaccine. So black people are like, let's do it. And when you arrive, oh, you're black? No, you're not getting the Moderna. You're getting the other one.
Right.
The what? The fourth dose?
Are both the Moderna and the Pfizer using that same messenger technology?
Yeah, they've done that. They're the only ones who did that. And also Pfizer corrected Ivanka. They didn't take a single dime of the warp speed, whatever project, unlike Moderna.
Yes.
Not a single dime. They're Pfizer. They own Viagra.
Well, yeah, see, that's Pfizer right here in Connecticut.
Yeah. In New Haven. Yeah.
Of course, the Pfizer is very big. As a matter of fact, when I was in school, I did a paper on Pfizer about their self-directed groups or units. Because that was, must have been about 12, 13, 14 years ago. It was very interesting. And I went over to Pfizer and spoke to some of the geneticists in order to do that. Because they have self-directed teams. And actually now, some of the companies are finding, since COVID has forced people to be at home, they're using more of that self-directed model. And guess what? Productivity is way up here. So.
No more coffee breaks.
Yeah, but the productivity, but also too, is the mental state that they're in, because now they're really self-directing themselves. The companies are leaving them alone. This is your expertise. There's no micromanaging. You know what I'm saying? And people are actually just feeling more in control of their work. And with that control, they're tending to produce more and more quality work.
But there's the other issue is that I see that in my line of work, and we're not, pharmaceutical. What we do is we are consultants for governments and pharmaceutical companies and medical device, whatever, and patient advocacy groups about life sciences, which is how drugs or treatments can have positive or negative outcomes, or a positive outcome can actually lead to something very negative. Viagra, how it was discovered. it's supposed to be a drug that the FDA asked to be removed from the market originally in 1989, because Pfizer had not realized that one of the most common side effects was how does it called, the syndrome, erections. And all of a sudden you had 80-year-old guys taking Viagra for blood, as a blood thinner, getting to the hospital and say, this is the first time in 20 years, what's going on? And it doesn't go down, it doesn't stop.
Oh.
And the problem is, if that happens to someone in your family who is male and has a penis, and the penis does not stop being erect for 24 hours, that penis will never stop being erect and will lose all sensitivity. It calcifies, the blood calcifies. It's a real problem. So there's a way, there's an injection to stop that. So, old people were starting to freak out. And the FDA sent a letter to Pfizer saying, hey, we're getting this adverse event. This is bad. Of course, I imagine they laughed a lot. Thought, we have to remove the drug from the market. And then somebody at Pfizer, I don't know who, was a genius, said, wait. How about we rebrand it and change the indication to male impotence? And they were like, you're crazy. And there you go. They became rich overnight, like crazy rich with that thing. You realize Viagra is reimbursed and not the pill in all countries? It's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pfizer, I mean, I think the new vaccine is promising, but the problem is, let's be very honest, this virus has been cunning. Very cunning. I don't think.
Well, another question, I'll make it very quickly. A quick question. Viruses evolve, they change. So I haven't read much about that. I'm sure it's out there. Like, okay, this may be effective right now. By the time they get it to all of the population of people, being that now it's so out of control anyway. As it evolves, will it change to something different where the vaccine will no longer be potent enough, or maybe something else changes where it morphs into a new, from our reading, COVID
20 or 21, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We think it's going to become like the flu. The reason why we get vaccinated for the flu each year is because it mutates every year now.
Yes, it changes, yes.
That's the problem with endemic diseases. And also, we noticed 2 mutations in COVID that, because we try to understand what happened in Bergamo in Italy, why all of a sudden people starting collapse. Now, we know that China lied a lot about the casualties. We know that through CNN documents. We knew that from the start. It didn't make sense. The curves, 50,000, just 2 point per, and the contagion rate was, the R naught was increasing every day, but the number of casualties was a linear curve, which didn't make sense. Exponential linear, it doesn't work together. You have to. And the thing is, we know that the more it's an RNA virus, so the more they mutate, the least lethal they become. Because mutation is technically, mutations are aberrations in nature. So natural selection, except for humans, for example, when you have people born with disabilities, I was born, I should have died at my birth, technically, but they were doctors, so I didn't die. But natural selection wouldn't have allowed me to live. Well, viruses, because I had a mutation or whatever, but these mutations usually disappear in nature because they're not adapted. Okay. And the problem is that it mutated to become less lethal, but then we noticed something. Now we have confirmation. It mutated to become more contagious, way more. So you end up with the same number of casualties.
Right. I can see that.
So that's why I always say, I think, it sounds religious, but we need to respect the virus, said Dr. Fauci one day, and he's right.
I believe that, yes.
We need to respect that thing because we always thought we had figured it out. Oh, it's the flu. I will never come to America. Oh, 270,000 people died officially. Insane.
And 350,000 excess deaths.
How many people died during the Second World War from America? 550,000, if I recall, in 4 years. In the midst of the most violent war ever, involving nuclear weapons, napalm, no, incendiary bombs and whatnot. COVID killed half that number in 7 months in America, and people are like, yeah, it's a hoax.
And surprisingly, folks are not respecting the virus. People, a lot of folks is continuing on. Michelle, we had that discussion last night, as usual. I've actually talked to a couple of people, which I had to kind of hold myself because, I mean, I can't, you just get really angry when they tell you about their Thanksgiving Day holiday on the phone. You're like, and you're trying to hold back. You know what I'm saying? While they're saying that, you're trying to, stay in the non-judgmental zone. But no, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to judge you because you're not respecting this virus. Why are you over there having 10, 12 people in your house, all your little nieces and nephews running around, grandma over here, and it's hard to hold yourself. And these people are just, Thanksgiving, remember, on Thanksgiving, COVID gets pretty. Any other day, but on Thanksgiving, all of a sudden, it becomes this welcome guest, and everyone's home. And then they ask me, what did you do? You know what I'm saying? You haven't started hearing the Thanksgiving stories yet, and you probably might hear from some people, but people are not ready traveling other states. These are people that I know. Mm-hmm. One I spoke to last night, they live in North Carolina. She actually called during our book group, and I couldn't speak to her, so I called her this morning because after our group, I didn't want to talk anymore. She went to Texas.
By airplane?
There was no quarantining, Michelle. There was no quarantining. She went to Texas.
She's got it.
The day before Thanksgiving, helped make that Thanksgiving dinner, and had Thanksgiving dinner the next day of Thanksgiving with 15 people.
Oh my God.
And
I'm sorry. That makes me cringe.
And one of the people there was her sister, which is much older than her. Well, not, yeah, she's quite a bit older than her. Was 93.
Oh, well,
93.
She had a good life.
Right. So next week she won't even be there. And had all the little kids running around and just going to school, Michelle. No, I'm serious. Had the great nieces and nephews. And no, Michelle, I'm telling you what I'm dealing with. That's why I said to keep my sanity. That's why I can't do no extra. I can't do any extra.
Rick said she had a good
I'm done. No, but I'm suspecting something. Americans every year complain about Thanksgiving having to go to their family that they hated, the uncle, this, that, I don't want to see them. And this year they all traveled. And here's my theory. People do it on purpose so that they can contaminate their folks and get rid of them. At one point, I'm like, why are you doing that?
But they are, I think so. And they're making the ones that aren't getting their own stimulus packages together because up on the hill they can't get together. So as I told Michelle, they put their own package together of old auntie, mom, and dad. One of them down at Brown International Airport on television. I was watching the journalists, stop random people. Well, her mother's 87, the father's 88. She said, I have not seen them.
She must have dead.
No, since COVID. And you know they were your people. They were your people, Rick, not mine.
But exactly, because in the family, there's some dark humor among white people about,
no, it's not dark. It's
maybe grandma this year is not gonna make it.
No, that's not dark. That's real. You know full well y'all can kill a mother and father if y'all need some money. Okay.
It's a perfect crime.
He's talking about that's some dark little thing. That's not dark. We all know that.
It is dark humor because when your grandma dies, when you tell her, "Hey, I got you," right? No, I mean it's horrible, but
yeah, you get that house and that summer home and that whatever and that bank account and all those investments she made in Pepsi-Cola in 1925. Rick, we already know. You don't try to clean it up.
Y'all have devolved in this unhappy note, despite all the cringeworthy topics.
No, but I'm wondering seriously.
Let's keep in mind that we have been shepherded this entire year of coronavirus by a lunatic.
Yes.
And
he's not a lunatic.
Now,
he's just a guy. I don't think he's a lunatic. I think it's worse than that. I think he's
Rick, they laughed me out of the book group last night. BJ was trying to throw her cup at me because I said we have to hope that Biden and Harris are going to get us to a better place.
yes.
But I know you all are not going to laugh at me.
Really?
Well, mentally, I think they are. I think mentally he has helped me. Other day, he was on TV yesterday, day before yesterday. And even whether he's lying or not, he said with a calm, nice voice, just try to hold on because help is on the way. Now, he could have been telling me a lie, but it's been so long. It's been so long that I heard someone talk in a calm, quiet voice. I was almost mesmerized, Rick. I'm not saying I believe it.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying it's been so long.
The Thanksgiving speech, when I watched it, I was like, that sounds very, that's like, he didn't insult me or my friends. He didn't say we were shit. He didn't say everybody should die and I'm the best. What's going on? He's not the president. They're right. He's illegitimate. A real president would say, I'm the best. You're wrong.
Right. And he said, help is on the way. He said, hold on. Don't be in his face. He said, help is on the way. Just try to hold on. And I'm saying to myself, we ain't told nobody, anybody said they cared about us. And the last, you just like, y'all gonna die. Only old people dying. Get them damn kids in school. We got
What do you mean teachers are dying? Teachers are with kids.
The teachers better get in the damn school, else we're gonna hold up money in your district. Now you get out there, you have children? We don't care about your kids. The teachers got kids and families. You
let your kids, God damn it.
So that's what we used to hear, Michelle. Why you laughing, girl? You know, we've been beaten down so bad.
This year has been so much more traumatizing. I mean, just try to imagine if Biden had been there a year ago, how different this year would have been. I mean, we started out the beginning of this show talking about how drained and we are, and PTSD and mental. We really are.
I'm telling you. What I was telling you is that
disability, because we have been abused.
Well, what I was telling you about it's taking so much work just to try to keep my own mental sanity, that translating to a cry for help. And being I can't take no extra from anyone because there's too much extra going on. And it's not even their fault. Yeah. It's that we live in a time you're so bombarded. So for those that are relatively sane and trying to hold on to it, you're bringing me to that edge. So it really is a cry for help. Everybody needs mental health. Everybody needs it because that's what's actually happening. You're going to your job, people are telling you you're going crazy. You're going to the grocery store, your family. Well, I can't say family because I don't do them no more. But, it's just, it's just, me and Michelle, we're orphans. We are orphans.
I'm wondering about something about that. Aren't people becoming more and more prone to mental health issues the more powerless they feel?
Of course.
And Trump has all of his life felt powerless despite his power because he was never admitted in the high club of the Davos billionaires, of the kings and queens of this world. He was seen as nouveau riche, for years. Yes. He had this need for revenge. And I wonder if you become crazy the more. Hitler too felt powerless for 2 decades until he got it. He got his power. And you're like, is that the source root of all our problems? That if we don't give people the ability to be accountable for their actions and to feel empowered at a young age to make their own decisions and accept the consequences of their, would that help? Because also in America, everybody thinks about success and failure all the time in this binary. Trump to me reflects America because winner, loser. It's not about true, false. It's to win or to lose.
But it's all relative, and that's another argument that people are not addressing. And that's why it's so sick in this country. Success is different for everyone. But in this country, success means big, gigantic house.
And crush your neighbor.
Big car, right. So success is different. I mean, it's like, you can find so many small examples. That person that volunteers for literacy every day after she goes to work, that makes her feel successful. It is success to her. But this country,
No.
You have a tendency to make people feel less than, because success is whether with the Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Cornell, or whether you have that advanced degree, PhD, which has people to get it, go crazy in the process. And because they were teetering before they got there. Yep. It's all about what kind of car you drive, where you live. So
kind of woman you have.
What you got,
it's not about whether you love her or you want to have sex for her. Actually, it's whether other guys will look at her like she's hot. You should not be dating her. I had some friends telling me, why do old guys date young women? Do they think they really love them? And I'm like, no, they don't. But you've noticed. And you notice they're ugly, but they're with models. So, and you will never be able to be with that model. The message this guy is sending is to you. I'm ugly, I know it, but I got more money than you. Just people don't realize how, I think people are miserable because they seek power. There's a quote from, it's apocryphal gospel that they found in Ethiopia, actually, the Nag Hammadi. And there's this quote from so-called Jesus Christ, but I'm sure, those are more authentic than the so-called original. He says, happy the man who gets power, happier the man who renounces power. So you're happy when you become powerful, but the real power is to renounce power. That's the ultimate power. When you can choose to be powerful or not. That's the true eternal power, because you don't care if you die or live. You're too full, too wholesome.
It's kind of like the idea of of minimalist kind of living, and staying off the rat race, staying out of the rat race, and really, as Venita was saying about success, but really kind of identifying those things that genuinely make you happy, which I know for me have never had to do with material things, but for me, I think it's because I had a lot of material things as a child, but I also had a lot of sadness, and so it became clear for me that material things don't automatically equal happiness. But I think that for a lot of people, when you don't have material things, then getting them becomes a real driving force in life, and because you think that's where happiness is going to come. And you can also just be so spoiled with so much stuff that you can't imagine living without it. And so, we just have these real kinds of, I think dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships to material things.
But where'd that come from? Because when I spend a lot of time with my godparents, probably about 70% of my time in Society Hill in Philadelphia, which was the only Black folk that was there, and they were all wealthy people. And I mean, not just middle class, but relatively wealthy. They still had a different idea. It was live and let live. That artist over there was doing his own thing. He was a hippie. His mother and father as much money as Jesus almost, but you never knew that. That was not his focus. You understand what I'm saying? It was still, so something else happened. Because I remember during that time, the two gay gentlemen that lived next door, they were partners. One was Black, one was white, one was a lawyer, the other was a doctor. And they had a cool brownstone, but that wasn't the focus. It just like something else happened. It's not the point. And I, as a little girl, I was a little rich Black girl, little rich poor Black girl. So something else actually happened to really send.
That was before the me era.
That's what it was. Because I remember, I'm like, wait a minute, that was around people all the time. I mean, I was the only little Black girl sitting up in the loge at the Nutcracker Suite in the Wharf Astoria. You understand what I'm saying? I was the only little Black girl down at Penn Central ice skating in the rink. I was the only little black girl that was sitting down there, down by the front street in the church in the evening with the brownies. With all what, you know, it's just like, but it still was different. So something else happened.
The me culture took hold, you know,
It had to be.
in
It was, you know, people always had.
And you know, and it was Rick at the beginning of this conversation that
yes,
that talked about the need for community, you know.
Yes.
But the me culture, you know, ate away at the concept of community. You know, all that mattered was that I do what I want, I get what I want, I please me, you know.
Well, they changed the definition of individualism. They changed the definition of individualism. When they said individualism in the 70s, they meant individualism, not separate yourself from community.
A responsible
not
person.
to embrace more racism and biasness, but to be an individual in your thinking, be creative, you know, those things. And then they split the switch. Individual means I'm better than you. I'm going to live in a better neighborhood. I'm going to drive a better car. Oh, my PhD, by the way. There was plenty of that. Highly educated people. Matter of fact, it put some of these folks to shame. But there wasn't wearing that as some badge. Now the people use it as a form of separating people, which is very tragic. It's so tragic. It's unbelievable how tragic that actually is. It really is. So that's where the separation comes. Where, okay, you've told those people, I'm wearing this as a badge. You show them more than tell them by the way you move. So they go over here and let you be over there. So there goes a community, whether it's within your immediate circle, whether it's in your extended circle, your working circle. This is what has happened. They're like, okay, so all right, I'll do my community over here. You do your community over there. And that's where it was very different. And I have very good memories of those times because those are wonderful times for me. Always, my childhood, my godparents, absolutely. I was a blessed child, to say the least.
That's there has been the last word.
But I think there's been what happened, and I'm thinking about it is in the past between 1945 and 1975. Remember in the book of Laurie Garrett, this whole world, we're gonna cancel all pathogens. Now we know how to control. Science is there, and it was the same era. And you grew up in there, but I remember my mother telling me we grew up with oranges as Christmas gifts as children. My mother grew up with that. In a matter of 20 years, she had a VHS and she was traveling the world, things that were unimaginable to them. And in 1973, some countries decided that oil wasn't free anymore. And, you know, the oil crisis, 1973, 1975, it stopped. And this is where the crisis started in Europe of unemployment soaring, as well as the United States. That destroyed the Carter administration right away. Reagan got elected. And I think that the certainty that you would get a house, you would get a car, you would have a wife or a husband and children before your 30s was shattered. And now it's about crushing the others because there's not enough for everybody. I think it's more the me era is born out of, wait, the American dream was an illusion. We're not guaranteed this access, and the hatred that came out of that. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, because you're right. Why did it change? And I don't know. You were talking about myths again. You know, the myths.
Complex stuff. Yeah, there's no one thing. Yeah.
So maybe we need myths. Maybe anthropologists are right when they say that, like the Greeks and the Romans, the elites, even Moses knows that. And in the Bible, Moses had been educated by Pharaoh and his scribes. You know, he was versed in mathematics and science. That's the principle of Moses. He's been raised as an Egyptian prince, and he falls upon these slaves that have no education because they're enslaved and they're not going to school, and then brings them to the desert. And what do they do first? They have a golden calf, and comes down the mountain and says, you need to slaughter the guys who, you know, wanted the golden calf. And the idea is that maybe myths are necessary so that people follow rules when we don't have enough time to educate everybody. Because think about it, the Greeks and the Romans were well aware the gods were bollocks. The Roman emperor, like when the emperor was designated, it was if pigeons or birds were flying over his crown, that meant the gods were with him. Well, guess what? In the back of the temple, you had people with cages ready to open them. They knew it was bollocks, but they also knew, and have a lot of books about that from that time, saying the vulgus, the common people, the common, cannot understand all sciences, and give them myths like the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are actually not 10; they're 30 or 40, like, among which, you shall stone the woman who you shall do that, you shall eat this and never that. But we always sum up to 10, and it's not, in my opinion, a coincidence. It comes down the mountain when they're idolizing this golden calf, which, in my opinion, means true religion is inaccessible to most people. So if you want them to follow morals, you need to give them some rules and some evil gods that tell them if you do something wrong, you'll go to hell. So I don't know. It's just a question I throw out there. Is that necessary for society or not? Look at Trump voters. They need a myth to survive the world.
I've always rejected the idea that it was necessary, but the older I get, the more I'm open to maybe so.
I don't know. I mean, nobody owns the truth. And the problem is that...
You're muted.
I agree. It's the same way with respectability policy. There's sometimes there's a respectability policy is needed. I feel the same way maybe with myths. It did deter you from doing certain things. I remember being a little child playing with my little cousins in the backyard, and someone said a word like "shut up," because that was a bad word when I grew up. You tell somebody "shut up," that was like,
it's rude.
The thunder would clap, and you turned around. All of us would turn around. That was a bad word. If you say that, you are not going to go to heaven. And you can just hear the shudder, and we weren't super religious either. But those little sayings was something that made you stop. I mean, I could have said anything. You won't see a leprechaun in March. If that was a saying and it meant that there was going to be a consequence for your behavior, you would stop and shudder. So yes, I do believe sometimes that those made up myths kept people in check. Not religion, I said, not religion.
It's different. Mm-hmm.
But it's very different. But I'm talking about just that fear, that healthy fear. And that's what it was. It wasn't a scary fear. It was like a healthy fear. It's like, oh, snap.
And we tell that to children because we don't have time to argue with them for 4 hours of, because children, I used to do something when I was a child that got my mother insane at 4 or 5. I remember that. You cannot go out. Why? Oh. Because it's cold. Why? Because it's winter. Why?
Oh, you are that kind? Yeah.
Now I understand. I thank her for not murdering me because I would have understood that she would have killed me, hid the body, and told the cops I had disappeared. But Trump voters do that. Why? Why is the voting machine like that? Why? So you need a myth, and the myth is Donald Trump is, you're right, a resistant, but actually he works with Joe. That's why he's pretending and not really fighting. They're both working against Hillary Clinton that they want to. You're at the point where I'm going to invent stuff and see if it sticks.
Yeah, you know what? Rick? You lost your mind. See, that's what I mean by it's a thin line that we're all walking. And you just walk right off the edge, Rick. You're gone. But
you got to go full. If you want, fight fire with fire. I've noticed the crazies, something I can do because I'm white. When I meet racist white people, I become over racist. So to show them but wait a second, what's your last name? O'Hara? You're Irish? A Celtic? A guy we conquered and slaughtered under Julius Caesar? He's still around. What the hell are you doing here? You're inferior. You shouldn't talk to me. They go what? What? You're crazy. I'm whiter than you are. I'm French. We're real whites. They go insane. And it works.
Rick, Yeah, I know it does. Rick, I'm surprised that Rick, you know what? We gotta take care of Rick. Because Rick is going to say some crazy to somebody. And we may read about you one day, Rick. And I believe you do that too.
they once in the subway, I'm a little crazy because there was this guy harassing a woman, and he was yelling at her. Nobody was moving. The subway was packed. It was Manhattan. And I was with my mother. I got angry. I said, hey, come here. Come yell at somebody of your size. Come on. Hey, come here. And I started insulting the guy. Come here, you pussy. Come on. And it wasn't even, the guy comes near. It's like, it shocked the guy. Like, you gotta be insane to talk to me like, I'm like, no problem. Come on. Let's talk. It's like, and he says, I think there's gonna be a shooting. Everybody left the subway except 4 guys and myself. My mother was paralyzed. I was like, no, Mom, if he had a gun, I would already be dead. So that doesn't reassure her at all. And I'm like, you're a talker. If you have a gun, pull it out. Show me your gun. Show me. And you know what happened? Some guys came without saying a word, put themselves in between us, and actually, like, were protecting me. And some guy said, dude, I never saw a white guy do that in New York City. I only see that in Bronx or Queens. I'm like, I'm from Queens, that's why. But I was surprised by how fast the entire train left. And I'm like, if he has a gun, you all run at him. We can have it. But people are not like that. And those were not.
No, Rick. No, see, no, it depends on who was on the train. Was it the train full of black people?
No, there were 3 black people, and they're the only ones who stood up.
They're going to leave the train, Rick. They're going to leave it.
Oh, no. They actually are the only ones who stood up and said, go away and help. There was another black guy who yelled at me this time for like, dude, I want to go home.
Oh, well, yeah.
That was it. But all the white people left so fast. Like, I didn't have the time to see it, that I was like, where's everyone? The subway's empty. Like, all the car was empty.
Yeah, so you got lucky, Rick. You got lucky, Rick. You got very lucky, Rick. Because if I was there,
here's the thing.
The white people have been heading out the door. I would say, I hope that boy be okay.
Oh, no, don't worry. There's a thing you can ask in my neighborhood, or as well as in France. I just hope employers never check some of my French names, because I used to be. I'm gonna quote a show. I'm the danger. I'm not a.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
With friends. No, let's say the cops know. I'm not in the